Jones, you got the power to know you're indestructible. Always believe in Phil Jones. Welcome everybody to the stream today. The Premier League preview is here. Yes, I've been a little bit AWOL this week, been a little bit ill, down with a little bit of flu, but we are back stronger. We have Chumbawambered for today's stream. Today, of course, the main topic of conversation with Manchester United's Player of the Year. So get into the chat. Your Player of the Year for Manchester United, but also we want to be building towards next week where we're going to be doing our Team of the Season, our Premier League Player of the Year as well with, of course, SofaScore. So make sure you get into the chat. Your player for your club, is it, the likes of Martin Odegaard, Kevin De Bruyne, Erling Haaland, and also, we want to go by position for next week. So make sure you get all those suggestions in and then we can have an absolute corking stream next week. But of course, this week we are talking Premier League. There's still a few things that need to be decided, such as Manchester City's quest for the treble. I was actually at the Etihad on Wednesday night for the Champions League. Real Madrid just frankly didn't show up. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about how City are probably the best under Pep Guardiola they've ever been at the moment. Their quest for the treble, will they win it this week? Or will Arsenal win the Premier League? We will see all these things. Welcome everyone to the chat. Charlie is in the chat, the treble chasers. Welcome back, Charlie. Mars is in the chat. Alan Shaw as well. Met you 2 weeks in Blackpool. Cheers for the beer. Took all the tactics you gave me and destroyed the Fleetwood under the 10s the next day. Big shout out to Alan as well. Our friendly Scottish football coach. Big shout out to you as well, my friend. Charlie, this is live, so all the thoughts that you've got, get into the chat. Did you enjoy Jack Grealish's performance against Real Madrid? Because I went to 2 of the games in the Champions League group stages that City played, both Borussia Dortmund and they played Copenhagen. Of course, against Copenhagen, Haaland just destroyed them in about 45 minutes. And then we had the Borussia Dortmund game where Dortmund were actually better than City for me in that match for 90 minutes. Jack Grealish was very, very poor in that game. Same moves every time on the left wing. Very obvious what he was doing. I thought against Real Madrid, though, absolutely fantastic. The development of him, from that first game in the Champions League to where he was against Real Madrid. Great coaching from Pep Guardiola and great growth from Jack Grealish as well. Tricky, explosive, difficult to play against, had a lot in his locker, defended exceptionally well as well. And I like players that work hard, 100%. Big shout out to Radu as well in the chat. Ewan, with some breaking news, up to 4th in the Fantasy 606 qualifier, 15 points behind second. Don't worry, Ewan, we'll also talk about FPL as well. My quest to get into the top 100k looks pretty much like a failure. We did well last week, though, in fantasy football, 108 points, -4 for a transfer. Of course, captaining Callum Wilson was the big one. I did tell the world to do that. Everyone ignored me and decided to go with Isak because of his expected minutes. Callum Wilson had scored 8 goals in a calendar month, the most of any Premier League player I've ever managed. Callum Wilson is in such hot form right now that even if he played half an hour, I'd prefer to have him over Alexander Isak. Plans for next week, of course, I'm either going to go with Willock to Gundogan or Willock to Bruno Fernandes, and then probably looking for either John Stones to Luke Shaw if I'm going to go with Gundogan, or potentially getting in Luke Shaw for either Sven Botman, Soufal, or alternatively downgrading Antonio to Greenwood, getting Bruno Fernandes in, just making for the -4. Big plans. Charlie in the chat. Grealish playing so well at the moment, vital in this team, absolutely so vital. He will be definitely rested this weekend. Jack Grealish, I don't think it's going to be Phil Foden and Mahrez on the flanks. I've got another option in FPL, going with Phil Foden. So going Haaland, Mahrez, Foden as my 3 City, and then of course John Stones will have to be downgraded to Aaron Wan-Bissaka or Victor Lindelof or Raphael Varane. So that's another option as well. Up to 10k now. Wilson captain was huge. Well played, Ewan. Good work there. But guys, let's move on to the football, the chat we're going to talk about today. There is a few games we're going to be diving into. Mentioned the Manchester City game. They face Chelsea. On Sunday, we're going to be talking about that. Of course, that is big for the title race. City can win the Premier League. On Sunday, they can extend their lead over Arsenal and basically pull it out of the range, which could happen. With Arsenal's result in there, we're also going to be focusing on the Manchester United versus Bournemouth game. That's a big game in the race for the top 4. And of course, going to focus a little bit on Liverpool. Their form has been absolutely ridiculous in the last 7 games. Trent Alexander-Arnold is flying. Salah's back in the goals. But I want to focus a little bit on Curtis Jones, a player that's been heavily criticised by parts of the Liverpool fan base, by parts of the media, and I think it was wrong. I thought the player had talent, just needed that game time. How Jurgen Klopp spoke about it in the press conference, we'll have a little look at that. But that's what we're going to be speaking about today. The Premier League, of course, any other topics that you've got. If you've got any questions on Southampton, Leicester, Leeds United, because one of the players that someone needs to pick up, maybe not this summer, but next summer, very much will be Carlos Alcaraz. He is a very, very impressive footballer, playing for a team that's not having much possession, but doing some damage in the penalty area. Massive, massive talent. Or Lavia, where should he go? Reports that Lavia will probably leave Southampton in the summer. I've heard some insight in terms of which clubs will be targeting him, so we can talk about that as well. Remember, guys, this is your show, so anything you want to ask, do get into the chat. Aidan, big shout out to you as well. Aidan Nolan in the chat. Aidan, who is your player of the season for Manchester United? Charlie, not sure we will rest. We need to keep the momentum going for the FA Cup and Champions League final. I think there might be some resting I genuinely think that John Stones might be rested this week, just because that's how Pep's done it previously. I think Haaland plays to the end of the season, but I do think the likes of Jack Grealish, Bernardo Silva, Kevin De Bruyne, I think those guys will be rotated. I think Pep will get that right with it, but I do agree in terms of some players need to keep that fitness. I think the likes of Diaz needs to keep playing. I'd love to say John Stones, but I think he'll be rested. I think Akanji needs to keep playing. I think Haaland needs to keep playing. I think the likes of Gundogan needs to keep playing just to keep that rhythm and that ability to fly through. Radu, I'm coming to Old Trafford all the way from Romania for the second time alive to see Man United versus Chelsea. Anyone wants to grab a beer together near the pub? Radu, give me a shout. I am going to that game as well, sitting in the TRA. So yeah, definitely Radu. Hit me up, my good friend, and we'll go for maybe a little pint. Glass of wine, whatever's down. Aidan in the chat as well, Rashi, but special mentions to Bruno, Shaw and Martinez. Right, so let's move on to that kind of chat. Manchester United's player of the season will be announced on the 28th of May, just after the season has finished. I think United have been interesting this season. There's been moments where United have looked unbeatable, best team in the world. You go back to the run in the Europa League, beating the likes of Barcelona, Betis, beating Newcastle in the League Cup final. United looked unbeatable, but very much ran out of steam in recent weeks, and hopefully the little break that United had is going to help them to kind of get back to that level. Player of the season's an interesting one for Manchester United. I think there's been some good performances. I think there's been some pretty average performances from some players in there as well. But I do think the standouts for me this season have been the likes of Bruno Fernandes, Marcus Rashford, Martinez, Casemiro, I think deserves a big shout out. And a lot of people talking Luke Shaw. I think Luke Shaw's been good this season. Would I say player of the year quality? Probably not. But I do think he's been decent this year, so we'll have a look at him as well. So let's start with Casemiro. I think Casemiro is a great place to start. The impact that Casemiro's made when he's fit on this Manchester United team has been absolutely massive. I think one of the things with Casemiro, as we mentioned, rhythm with Manchester City and them having to maintain that, Casemiro is very, very much a rhythm player where it takes him a little bit of time to get back up to the level. I think we saw that when he came into the team, but I think we've also seen that in recent weeks where he had the suspension and now he's come back into the side. But in terms of signings, not going to be the one that the Manchester United wanted. They wanted Frankie de Jong at the start of the summer. They pivoted and went with Casemiro. I think his leadership qualities, his ability to win the ball back has been absolutely superb for Manchester United. When we're looking at players that have been signed in recent years, there's been a number of that have kind of really let Manchester United down in terms of their work rate, their ethic, them wanting to do that. And I think what Casemiro's really brought Manchester United is that solid determination in midfield. And and a real general, a real boss. And when United have been on song this season, Casemiro has been absolutely purring. And not only has he been winning the ball back and tackles and the interceptions, but it's things that the sort of the intangibles of the game, the ability to control and to dictate. But the really interesting statistic, only Bruno Fernandes and Marcus Rashford have been directly involved in more goals than Casemiro this season. 5 goals and 6 assists in all competitions. But of course, that's not really, the best parts of his game. It has been the tackling, the intercepting, the winning the ball back. When you're looking at him compared to, the top players in Europe, Casemiro ranks in the top 1% of players for the following statistics: tackles in the defensive third, blocks, passes blocked, clearances, touches in the defensive third. You're looking in the top 5% of players for aerial duels won, dribblers tackled, and through balls, which is an interesting one in there. Tackles plus interceptions, 5 per 90. Casemiro has been a boss and should be spoken about in the Player of the Year awards. I think if he gets himself a fixed partner that is more of a number 8 than Christian Eriksen, again, I think Christian Eriksen is a wonderful footballer. What he's done this season, his contribution, especially in the Premier League in terms of assists, 7 assists, which is a great record for a player that's missed quite a lot of the campaign. I think United upgrade that position. Casemiro looks better and better. Do I think it was a signing for the long term? Absolutely not. But it's a signing for now, and Casemiro is a player that's massively shown his abilities for Manchester United. So I think definitely in the conversation, for player of the season. You look at when United have not had Casemiro, there's been, real problems with the side and real problems with how they've played in certain phases. And again, as I mentioned, it takes him time to get back into his rhythm, which I think affects Manchester United more than not. But I thought recently, performance against Wolverhampton Wanderers, really, really good performance there. Of course, tackles, interceptions, 5 tackles, 2 interceptions in this match. And just the command and the presence in the side for Manchester United, very much in that holding midfield position there, as we can see, number 18, protecting the centre-backs, protecting Man United's defence. Brilliant performances. But let's move on to another player again. I think we've got to, kind of move through here. A player that's out injured right now and the impact in Man United's possession game. And a player that was heavily, heavily criticised coming into the league for being too small, for being too weak. Has kind of stuck the 2 fingers up at most people. A player that I was so excited to see Man United sign. A player that can command a team out of the back with his passing, with his ability to clean up, to carry through as well. Lisandro Martinez has been an absolute breath of fresh air. One of the big things I think with centre-backs is we'll see more smaller, shorter, dynamic centre-backs as the game moves on, as we see more defenders adapt to the wide threat of inside forwards and, players that operate in between the lines. You need players like Martinez, and we need to see more of those. I think his adaptation to the Premier League has been absolutely fantastic. 125 tackles plus interceptions in the Premier League this season. Only Casemiro has turned the ball over more in those metrics. But as well, I think the thing that United fans have loved as well, I've loved this season, is that aggression, that tenacity, that ability to kind of step out and win the ball so cleanly, which really helps for, teams that press like United will do eventually. I think Martinez has been a breath of fresh air, and we've really struggled. Without Martinez out of the back, I think United have struggled not only to win the ball back in these centre-back areas and be convincing defending the channels in those wide areas, but also Man United's possession structures look very, very poor. We started to see Bruno and Martinez gaining a really good understanding of those long kind of balls over the top, similar to Marcus Rashford spinning in behind. United just don't have a passer of the same quality from the base of the defence if Martinez is not there. Of course, the metatarsal injury against Sevilla ruled him out for the rest of the season. I think that also killed Man United's run in the Europa League. I think with Martinez, United don't go to Sevilla and lose that game. The possession out of the back was massively impacted there. But a player that's just been brilliant as a servant already for United. Radu in the chat. Leisha's my player of the year despite his perfect profile for a style and his performances. I love he symbolises the change in mentality that we need absolutely in there. Aiden, Casa lost his rhythm and the smile on his face after the suspension. The evil Casa, I think. But yeah, I think with someone like Martinez, you can just see the levels. And that is against every United centre-back. You know, Martinez, for me, is levels above Raphael Varane, Harry Maguire, Victor Lindelof, Luke Shaw. It is massive. And I think when you get players like that, similar to Casemiro, you know, 2 players that are signed in the summer that have humongously upgraded Manchester United's team and are very much in the conversation for Player of the Year. If I was going purely on passion and in terms of heart and in terms of a player that's shown what Man United, you know, need in a player, I'd be voting Martinez, you know, Player of the Season every single day of the week, because he is what United needed for a long, long time. And it's great to see him. And reports today is that United are set to offer him a bumper deal because of his performances. If that strikes you as someone that doesn't understand a player's skill set, it's a little scary. But Martinez, you know, one of the choices for Player of the Year for me. Let's move on to kind of the obvious ones. I think there's 2 real obvious candidates here, Bruno Fernandes and Marcus Rashford. Both, I think, are neck and neck for this. I think both have been absolutely superb in their work. Bruno Fernandes, just in terms of how he's been so present for Manchester United this season, 55 appearances, more than David De Gea, you know, most minutes in Europe for an outfielder. This guy has been absolutely phenomenal. 261 shot-creating actions. The next player for Manchester United, Marcus Rashford, with 112. Say that again, that statistic. 261 shot-creating actions. Nearly 150 more than any other United player. You think in the 13 assists, most for Manchester United, 11 goals, only Rashford scored more. Bruno Fernandes under Erik Ten Hag has been absolutely fantastic. And when you look at his expected assist numbers, they're at 15.6 in the Premier League. With only 8 assists, the key thing for Man United is if they had somebody that could consistently put the ball in the back of the net, Bruno Fernandes would be up there with Kevin De Bruyne, you know, challenging for the Thierry Henry record this season. He has been simply sublime. He's also wound up opposition fans, which I, as a United fan, love. I think he's a player that you'd love to have in your team. He complains, he whines. I like that about him. I think that's something that gets the standards up. I think it shows that heart, that determination, and his performances on and off the pitch have been brilliant. You know, he's a leader. He's a player that plays with his heart on his sleeve. He's everything you want in a football player, and I think his game is improving under Erik Ten Hag. I think we haven't seen the best Bruno Fernandes yet, which is exciting. And I think he's been a huge part of this season. Which moves on to another player that's been massive for our season, a player that has linked with Bruno Fernandes on many occasions, Marcus Rashford. 29 goals in all competitions. Only Mbappe and Haaland have scored more in Europe's top 5 leagues. What a season. And going back and just watching his goal scoring, it's been brilliant. The way that he has improved this season, I think we're going to do an entire video on Marcus Rashford on the main channel in the next 2 weeks. The way that he's improved himself in the penalty area in terms of the variety of goals that he scores in the box. You know, Marcus Rashford, you know, last season, previous seasons would score a lot of his goals in these kind of like left-hand side of the box, in this kind of channel. You know, he'd finish a lot from cutting inside, he'd finish a lot shooting across. But the way that he's developed his game, you know, not only with his head, he scored more goals with his head this season than any other season. The way that he's developed scoring on the right-hand side of the box as well. This guy has been absolutely brilliant for Manchester United. You think is the big games for United. Barcelona away, you know, a goal and then basically forcing the own goal. You think the performance in the League Cup final, the link for his goal, the touch, the flick, the finish against Newcastle, so good. Marcus Rashford has kind of defined Manchester United's season under Erik Ten Hag. And from both of those players, you know, Marcus Rashford, if we're looking at the Premier League, because at the moment my Premier League player of the season, it's a pretty simple one, Erling Haaland. You know, you don't come into the league and break every single record that's ever been set without being player of the season. You know, forget your John Stones, forget your Kevin De Bruyne's. Simply Erling Haaland is player of the season by a mile. With the same note there, Marcus Rashford's goal scoring has been so important for Manchester United. You know, if United aren't performing, you know, haven't played well, Rashford has come up with big goals. Massive goals. So with that logic, you know, I think Marcus Rashford probably should be player of the season for Manchester United. But again, you know, that's just about statistics. That's about, you know, general thoughts on it. You know, guys, do get involved, do vote for your player of the season. But I'm going to vote for one man. That is Wout Weghorst. You know, I think his ability to Play with passion. It's lovely. It's refreshing. May not be the best goal scorer in European football. May not have, set the world alight with his goals. He needed to score early. That was one of the big things that he needed, Wout Weghorst. But he shows passion. So what the hell? We're going to give him a vote. But guys, you get into the chat. Let me know who you think is going to be player of the season for Manchester United or who you would pick. We got Ryan saying easy Bruno Fernandes. I think that's a very valid shout in there. I think Marcus Rashford is a very valid shout. I think, Martinez, I think Varane, very, very valid shout. But yeah, we're going to give it Weghorst just for the fun of it. I do think Marcus Rashford will win it. Marcus Rashford does deserve it. But I tell you what, lifting a trophy in English football, one of the greatest moments of Wout Weghorst's life in here. Billy in the chat, Dave, do you think Sancho will get a lot better once we have more dynamic centre forward and runners from midfield to support? So Billy, I've been a bit unwell this week. Not really been able to do anything. One of the things I have been doing is watching football documentaries. And one of the ones that I was watching was the Borussia Dortmund documentary. That was around the 2018-19 season. One of the big events that preceded that season, that came before that season, was the bus bombing, which Jadon Sancho was very much involved was on the team bus as, a terrorist who was trying to commit some sort of financial crime with a bombing. He was on that bus. That's a pretty traumatic situation. That's something that may still be in his mind. It may be something that's affecting him still. I think Manchester United need to explore that with him a little bit more. That's a situation where I forgot about that and I didn't know the severity of it. In the English press, the severity of that was basically, he's been involved in a bombing and, it was a small bombing and so forth. This was a bomb designed to kill the entire team. It only stopped killing the team because there was a fence and loads of cars in the way. That's something that needs to be explored. I think Jadon Sancho is, definitely needs some sort of help in that mindset. I think there's, his confidence has been effective recently. I think, he's a player that just needs to grow from that perspective. He has the talent. We know he's got the talent. I think there's a big thing in terms of getting the runners around him. Yes, I agree with that. But I also think there's a big mental stumbling block that he needs to find the right way to get through and the right way to grow around that. And that just comes from him. That's the nature of yourself and your mindset and how it all works and belief. It comes from him, and he's gonna hopefully gets the support he can have around that. And I think that's bigger than anything. I think that's bigger than signings. I think that's bigger than who he's playing with in teammates and so forth. Jadon Sancho needs to get the belief in himself back because he is a talent. Like the goals that he was scoring that 2018-19 season, ridiculous talent. The talent is still there. I think that this mental block is the biggest thing. And whether that takes a year, 2 years to get over, Jadon Sancho will be back to his best at some point. And the big thing with him is he's 23 years old. They're still very young. Remember people were writing Marcus Rashford off last season, the season before, when Rashford was 23, when Rashford was 24, saying he's finished. Rashford is now 25. He's playing the best football of his career. Jadon Sancho needs just to grow within himself once again, and I really hope he does. I really hope he grows and finds his ability to kind of get back onto it. And I do think that bus thing was a really weird thought that I had when I was just sat there thinking, this might be something that's affecting him. Are Manchester United giving him the support? That would be the situation. Do United have the psychologists in place? Do they have the therapists in place? Do they have the people that can help? Because at the moment, Manchester United is an absolute mess from top to bottom. So they need to put these things in place and to help an asset like that. And that's what Jadon Sancho is, a player that costs a lot of money. He has massive potential. But if he's not getting support from that perspective, then that's something the club need to deal with. And the club need to support him. And the club need to go out there and work on how they develop that. Because I think that's a massive part of football that Manchester United probably are well behind City, Liverpool, Arsenal, even Brighton, let's say, that they're not developing the other sides that you need to in a football club. For example, set-piece coach, throw-in coach, data science. That all comes into the same thing. And that's like the side of Manchester United that really needs to be worked on. And we look at young stars that have come through the club that have completely fallen off for whatever reason outside of, outside of football, that's something where Manchester United need to start building in some sort of duty of care, some education for these players. Being a millionaire at 19 must be absolutely crazy. I would have been, all over the place if I had that wealth and whatnot. They need the support, and I think that is something that needs to be developed massively within the football club. And just one example is Jadon Sancho. There's been many examples previously to Jadon Sancho. So, yeah, look, I really want Jadon Sancho to succeed at Manchester United. I think there's going to be a lot of his own personal work on his game, on his mental state, on his development. But I also think the club has got to really try and get into that and help it and help him grow and so forth. The talent, we all know the talent. Superb footballer, but needs to kind of get back to those levels and so forth. Darren in the chat. Sancho will be better next season. Standout season he had at Dortmund. He didn't have Haaland to finish off the assists. Can we blame Mason Greenwood for what happened? I think there's a lot of responsibility that has to be on Mason Greenwood. He makes the actions, but I also think there's responsibility on the institution. I think there's responsibility on his family. I think there's responsibility on the society. I think this is a big, big problem with, kids having too much money and not being educated well enough to developing other parts of their minds before throwing it away and causing these problems. These are things that United need to help, but there's also things that we as a society need to improve and help as well. So it's a bigger thing than just one thing. But yeah, Mason deserves, he's got to take a lot of responsibility for his actions. As simple as that. And again, should never play for Manchester United ever again. That's it. Done. Dusted. See you later. But hey, positivity. That's what we're trying to spread here. Look after yourself. Look after your family. Spend time developing your own ability to withstand the heat of life and pressure and when things go badly, because things go badly in life. Life is not all about the good. It can be, but there's also going to be the down. So you've just got to be able to build that psyche and so forth. Pressure is an incredible thing. One of the books that I read recently called Ant Middleton, called The Fear Bubble, thought was very, very interesting. If you personally struggle with presentations or you struggle with certain parts of your life where you feel anxious about doing something, read The Fear Bubble. Incredible book about bubbling fear, having fear as a moment, having fear as a bubble that you're not in yet, and not worrying about something outside of that bubble. Such as you got a big presentation to do and you're super worried about it at the moment. Why are you worried in that moment? You're quite safe in that moment. You're not doing the presentation. You're not there. And it's kind of building that out. Again, the book explains it really well. Really good little thing that I picked up over the last year or so. Really good for visual learners or people that have visual minds. I've got a very visual mind. So if that's you and you're a little worried, grab that book, give it a read, pull the stuff out of it. It's a lovely story as well on the back of it, but that's kind of the main part. He talks about his climbing Mount Everest, I think it is. He's climbing. He's speaking about that being a fear bubble. But yeah, fantastic. Guys, smash that like button as well, guys. Darren is absolutely right. We are rocking. We're talking football. And we are going to have a good time. So let's move into the Premier League chat. Obviously, Man United Player of the Year. We spoke about that. The relegation battle is still very much on. Forest have got a humongous game at home against Arsenal this week, and then facing Crystal Palace. We've got Everton facing both Wolves and Bournemouth at home. 2 games there that you'd expect Everton to win. Leeds United facing both West Ham United and Tottenham. Of course, Leicester, who are in an absolute weird position, facing Newcastle and West Ham, and Southampton already relegated. The race for the survival in the Premier League is going to be big this weekend. I think this doesn't change. I think Leicester, Leeds and Southampton go down. I think when you look defensively, the statistics are very, very, very poor from a defensive perspective. You've got Leeds conceding 71 goals, Leicester 67, and Southampton with 66. Forest are in and around that equation, but you'd say Forest's recent form has been better. Massive results against Brighton and Southampton. Big draw against Chelsea as well. They're kind of rocking across. But let's move to the top 4. Liverpool first up facing Aston Villa in the Premier League. Unai Emery's Aston Villa, high flying, could make those European positions for the first time in absolutely years. This, of course, is kicking off on Saturday at 3 o'clock. Liverpool, of course, have hit a bit of real good patch of form. A lot has been made of Trent Alexander-Arnold's position. Since the start of April, he's provided 6 assists in the Premier League. No players managed more in that time. Riyad Mahrez is the only player with more. He's got 7 goals plus assists in the league. 4 more than he'd managed in the entirety of the season before. Again, that moment since April has been absolutely fantastic for Trent. Again, change of system, change of tactics. We can kind of see it there. But I think one of the big things that this has allowed Liverpool to do is get more of their eights or their central midfielders in the final third. If you look at the average positions there, we can kind of see the new build-up for Liverpool in a sense of you've got the back three in Andy Robertson, Virgil van Dijk and Konate building in the back three. Trent's moving inside to join Fabinho, and their front five is very much made of the 3 forwards and then Curtis Jones and Jordan Henderson. And Curtis Jones is a player that's really, really excelling in this 3-8 role. And it's one of the things that Pep Linders wrote in his book a few times, a midfielder that goes on the outside. So basically kind of a midfielder that moves either wide of the forward or moves into that number 10 area. Basically kind of the 3-8 concept. And we see basically the tactics of Man City and Liverpool over the years getting closer and closer and closer together. You know, at the start of Klopp's tenure in Guardiola, they were probably quite polar in a sense of, you had the gegenpressing, you had the possession. Now they're slowly kind of getting to a really similar tactical setup. You know, both teams are using their 8s high now. Both teams have got an inverted fullback or an inverted defender, Stones or Trent Alexander-Arnold. But it is getting the best out players like Curtis Jones. His brace against Leicester City was so good. Both of the goals I thought absolutely outstanding. Movement, first touch, awareness in the penalty area, and then the finishes just absolutely brilliant. But one of the things that Klopp spoke about was Curtis Jones' reaction in the press and his intensity in the press was a lot better. We've got to remember that some of these players that Liverpool have signed that instantly come in and press are almost like golden eggs. It does take players time to develop to this structure. And when you look at the defensive statistics, Curtis Jones winning 3 out of his 3 tackles against Leicester City, one of the things that Klopp spoke about was his ability to win the ball back. And that's been massive. Absolutely massive, and it allows Liverpool to press better. It gives them more domination on the ball. It gives them that ability to get Trent inside, to get Trent on the ball, and it all comes from the aggression and the pressing from that midfield area, and Curtis Jones deserves a lot of credit for that, you know, along with the likes of Jordan Henderson. I think Fabinho's been a lot better with a partner next to him, both on the ball and defensively. You know, with Trent moving inside, can win a lot more possession back in those central areas, but also really dictate the play. Another 125 touches for Trent against Leicester City. Absolutely superb. Mohamed Salah with a hat-trick of assists, something that we've completely bypassed. 4 chances created, 2 big chances created in the game. Playing more as a playmaker, as this kind of wide right midfielder. Going to be a massive issue for Aston Villa to deal with. I think one of the big things with Aston Villa under Emery, they're playing a high line. They've won more offsides than any other team since Emery joined. There are nearly on 100 offsides, which is almost 40 more than any other side in the Premier League. Defensively, no teams conceded fewer goals away from home than Aston Villa. One of the problems in recent weeks has been Ollie Watkins not scoring goals. Ollie Watkins went through that absolutely crazy run of goals following Emery, top scorer in the Premier League in 2023 at a time, but it's not scored in 5, which is his longest goalless run since Emery took over. He's kind of the perfect player, I think, playing against this Liverpool team in terms of how he could pull the centre-backs into the channels and really cause them issues in those zones, which will allow, the narrowness of the 3 behind. I think that's kind of an area where Villa could overload Liverpool. It's with that narrow kind of band of 3 when they're in possession. Stones, Bundia, Jacob Ramsey inside. Ramsey's movement off the ball has been absolutely outstanding under Emery. Is defending the flank and then tucking inside. He's going to have a big job against Trent Alexander-Arnold. It'll be really interesting to actually see whether Ramsey follows Trent inside. Because at the moment, teams are kind of leaving it. They're sitting back into a more compact 4-4-2 shape. But actually, I think what could be quite a good counter, like we saw City do against Chelsea in the Champions League last season. No, in the league last season, when Chelsea were building with a basically 3-2-5 structure. Obviously, they built with it was a back three system. But City defended with a narrow 4-2-3-1. And they really stopped those two midfielders in the middle with their three. And that's what potentially we could see with Aston Villa. Little counter, more of a natural 4-2-3-1 defensive shape, stopping Liverpool in those areas. I'd love to see that. So talking Watkins kind of pressurising the defenders, and then you're basically blocking the passes into the two defensive midfielders. That could be a really interesting strategy for Unai Emery, but it could be a corking match, this one. I think there'll be goals in this game for sure. I think Watkins will be back in form after this match. I think Trent will very much be involved in it as well. But guys, get your score predictions in for this game. This is humongous for the race for the top four as well. Bob, would you call Curtis at Matt Zala? Absolutely, with his current role. That's kind of the outside midfielder role we spoke about before. That's kind of what Pep Linders calls it in his in the book that he wrote about last season. We're really recommending that. But kind of that Matt Zala role in a three-man midfield very much is in that inside left position, but also operating on the wing. You know, the Matt Zala translates to a half wing. Again, central midfielder moving out. Giuseppe Meazza was the first ever Matt Zala. We got a video on the Statman Dave YouTube channel if you want to check out that. But yeah, Bob, I'd say Curtis Jones is operating as a Matt Zala at the moment. So, you know, really operating well in those positions. Billy, Dave, what do you think about Diallo's role next season? I've seen people asking for him to start over Anthony, but his underlying numbers are actually similar, if not worse, to Anthony. Could he feature more as a 10? Billy, really interesting. He's played 10 and he's also played wide, and I think that would give United a really good balance at times in that inside channel. Could see Bruno Fernandes playing as a deeper 8, but I don't think he's a starter. I think he comes into the team as a bench player, as a player that's in the squad, and then we see what he does. You know, I think that's the beauty of it. Do I think he needs one more season on loan? Potentially. I think one more year at Sunderland could do him the world of good. But being selfish for Manchester United, having the four wide players of Garnacho, Marcus Rashford, Anthony, and Amad Diallo would be brilliant, and then Sancho potentially at 10, Sancho on either of those positions. I think that would be pretty decent in there. So yeah, no, I think Diallo will get minutes. I'd still potentially like maybe another loan spell, just because of this loan spell's been so good for him. But yeah, I'd like to see that. Anyway, guys, get your score predictions in for the Liverpool versus Villa game. Humongous for the race for the top four. United currently a game in hand and a point in hand over Liverpool. United just simply need to win 2 of the last 3 games. Face Bournemouth this weekend in the Premier League, which could be good. Bob, do you think the classic number 10 will make a comeback? Does the role need to be revised or tweaked to accommodate them more now? I think you've got to have a player that's very capable of pressing, like a Kevin De Bruyne or a Bruno Fernandes. I don't think the role's gone. I don't think the classic number 10 is maybe still here, but the movements are slightly different. I think there's more for number 10s to be operating as underlaps. Traditionally you'd say a 10 would sit in that number 10 area and dictate from that zone, and the players would move around that number 10. Whereas I think what we see now is number 10s being more, link players a la Odegaard or, let's say, Kevin De Bruyne at certain moments. They do their best work when they're kind of, combining with wingers and making movements. I'd say the number 10 now is a far more fluid position where you want them to be, reflecting the build-up of a team. You want them to be fluid in that mindset where they could take up the left position, the inside right position, the inside left position, the wing position. So I think it's just a more fluid position we see. I'm doing this with with Bruno Fernandes, but that very much could be Kevin De Bruyne. At times Kevin De Bruyne picked up a wide right position against Real Madrid in the Champions League. So they're just a little bit more fluid. They're a little bit more positionally liberated, you'd say, than maybe a fixed kind of number 10 that's going to always sit in that number 10 area and wait for players to move around him. I think it is more of a fluid position, and that's just because football's kind of moved on, and that's the nature of football. Again, your traditional Riquelmes aren't going to be putting pressure on the football as aggressively now. Again, the systems and the setups that we saw in that era with Villarreal was more a kind of 4-3-1-2 with Riquelme sitting in that number 10 area. That's still there, I think, but it's slightly different. I think you've got more of a second striker that plays that role now, and the playmakers sit a little bit deeper in there. So you want the second striker to be at the tip of the diamond, or arguably like a false nine type player, and your playmakers are actually at the base of midfield because that's where the space is now. The space for players is arguably in those positions is actually at fullback. That's where the time on the ball is the most. So it's just the number 10 has evolved, and I think the classic number 10 maybe isn't quite there. You could kind of argue that Messi played that role in the World Cup. Would that work in club football? Potentially, if you built a team around it. But I think that is the problem, that a classic number 10 would require the rest of the team to be very much covering for the defensive fragility of that. But no, I think it potentially will raise its head again. We always see comebacks of certain players based on what's available in the market, but I think at the moment it's slightly tweaked and changed. Darren in the chat saying Liverpool 2, Aston Villa 2. Bob saying 2-1 to Liverpool as well. And Moz in the chat, Bruno's played 550 minutes this year. That's almost 3 days on the pitch. That is an incredible bit of work rate for Bruno Fernandes. But yeah, pretty incredible how he's just played so much football. Talking about that, Manchester United go away to Bournemouth in the Premier League. Again, 3 o'clock on Saturday. Massive game for United, who've got their destiny in their own hands. The performance against Aston Villa was a classic Man United performance from this season. Create loads of opportunities. Don't take them. Get nervous. Hang on. Try and score on the counter-attack. And then Garnacho scored on the counter-attack. And I think Alejandro Garnacho has been really missing in recent weeks. I think the impact that he's had off the bench this season has been phenomenal. No player's been directly involved in more goals than Alejandro Garnacho off the bench in the Premier League. That is his, what he's been doing this season is the impact and the pace. But the composure for the goal against Wolves was so good. The composure and the finish, the way that he slowed himself down, stopped the defender, and then just pinged it in, posting in, was brilliant. And he's a player of immense quality. Really, really good. And when you look at players under the age of 20 in the Premier League this season, only Evan Ferguson at Brighton, and Wilfred Gnonto at Leeds have been involved in more goals, but Gnonto's got 14 starts, Ferguson's got 8, Garnacho just 4 starts with his 5 goal involvements. I think I'd start him against Bournemouth. I think Manchester United, need to look at how they can cause Bournemouth problems, and I think one of the ways of them doing that is having, the pace. I think they really struggled with that against United. So having that front three of Rashford, Anthony and Garnacho from the start could be a really good option. I think that allows, enough quality for United to play through, the press in certain moments. I think United have got a number of different things they could do against Bournemouth. One of the biggest things that Bournemouth struggle with is in that transition. And, either starting Garnacho or starting Jadon Sancho. I prefer to start Garnacho because I think he's in form, he's flying, but at the same time, he's played much better off the bench. So maybe starting Jadon Sancho in this game, going Rashford through the middle. I think the break, when Bournemouth have thrown bodies forward, you can really hit them on the counter-attack. And Dean Court, that was called these days? Dean Court, Bournemouth's home ground, get into the chat. Very susceptible there. The pitch is really small, which means transitional moments are massively available just because of the pitch. You can go from front to back super fast. And having players like Sancho or Garnacho out wide, linking with Marcus Rashford and his pace into the channel, I think is a perfect way, getting behind the Bournemouth defence. They're not great when you get into the final third after you've broken as well, and you can hit them with a switch of play through central midfield, pull them to the other side and then hit them with the underlap. I think that's a way that United can really get at Bournemouth. You know, they're very open with those types of movements. They're not great at tracking runners, especially when they're playing a back four. I think they probably will play a back four over a back five against Manchester United, just because that's kind of the nature of what Gary O'Neill's done this season at home. I think that's definitely one angle for them. Transition, underlaps, they'll get caught out all day with those types of movements from Bruno Fernandes. I think one of the other big things as well we saw with one of the goals that United scored against Bournemouth, is that movement from deep. We saw Luke Shaw clip a fantastic pass over the top from the wide area for Bruno Fernandes to come in and slide the ball across. When they're in their mid-block, they're a little bit susceptible. So when we're talking mid-block, when they're in the kind of, they're defending their, you know, just outside their final third, sort of around the centre of the pitch. When they're in that kind of possession shape, they tend to have a high line that is susceptible for movement in behind the defence. So, you know, be it Bruno Fernandes or Anthony in those wide areas or Jadon Sancho, they need to see a lot of movement from those wide guys spinning in behind the defence. But also with Marcus Rashford could always make those runs from out to in. So there's a lot of threat for Manchester United, direct over the mid-blocks, underlaps, patience, playing through the press, as well as the big thing. United's first goal that Luke Shaw scored was absolutely fantastic. And the way that Bournemouth squeezed United that day, if United can play through, especially in those wide areas, again, coaxing fullbacks out, dropping the ball back, and Luke Shaw continuing his run. I think it's going to be big for both of the fullbacks to not only play positive football, hence why I'd start Diogo Dalot and Luke Shaw every day of the week, but also driving inside and receiving the 1-2 and then playing a very, very good way of getting at the heart of Bournemouth's defence. It's something United need to be working on, those triangles with a wide player with the fullback, carrying through, driving through the middle. Loads of opportunity there. Bournemouth have earned only 22 points at home this season. Only 3 teams have got fewer points in the Premier League at home: Everton, Leicester and Southampton. Bournemouth has also conceded 27 goals at home. Only Leeds and Southampton have conceded more. When we're looking at Man United, you mentioned the likes of Garnacho on the counter-attack, whether he's from the start or not. But Bruno Fernandes this season has been so important. The expected assists, as we mentioned previously, 15.6, more than any other player in the Premier League. 108 key passes, more than anyone else in Europe. Getting Bruno the ball and getting him to create in the final third, but also, again, when United have built through the Bournemouth press and then him utilising those balls in behind the defence, vitally important. I think that's where the space is, which is good for United. United are good when teams step up the pitch and there is space in behind the defence. Again, short pitch, massive ability to spread in behind the Bournemouth midfield and area. So let's have a look at the head-to-head. Of course, the last game it was a 3-0 win for Manchester United. As I mentioned, Luke Shaw scored a very, very good goal with, playing through the press, driving through the middle. Was one of Luke Shaw's best performances of the season. Casemiro had an absolute fine day in central midfield, scored from a wide free kick as well. But I do think there's opportunity to kind of catch Bournemouth out. Saying that, Bournemouth beat Manchester United the last time they both played at home with Aaron Ramsdale in goal for Bournemouth. But I think United this is a must win for Manchester United. So let's hope the rest is flying through. Guys, get your score predictions into the chat right now for this game. Sport Gang saying hope for a draw in the Villa-Liverpool game and a win for United. How do you think Bournemouth will stabilise next season? I like their January additions, but I don't think they had enough. Yeah, same. I really liked what they did in January. I think January saved them. Really did save them. Signing the likes of Ouattara, Hamad Traore in there, but also bringing in Sensi at the back. Zubiani, obviously, he's not played that much yet, but humongous talent. They really sorted themselves out because they were done. They were done and dusted if they didn't make signings in January. So fair play to Bournemouth's recruitment team. Got to give them credit in that. Our Ouattara will be an absolute Premier League star. He's got the quality. Just needs to adapt to the league. 21 years old. Similar with Hamad Traore. Very, very similar quality. in there. A nervy 1-0 win for United from Daniel. Rado saying 2-1 to Manchester United. Moz is saying if Varane starts, we'll win 3-0. If not, we'll lose 1-0. Rado heard Rashi could be available for Sunday. I do think he'll start, to be honest, Radu. I think he'll definitely start. You know, he's had those issues this season, hasn't he, where he's been out for about, one game or so forth, his little muscle problems and so forth. So I think he'll be back. But if not, of course, Anthony Martial through the middle. Didn't change too much. And then Alejandro Garnacho from the bench again. I think that's what I would go with. Darren's going to go 3-0 United. We've got Bob with a 1-1. Sport Gang Dave, do you think Ahmad will play in the number 10 role or in a playmaking wing role? What would be your choice next season, Ahmad or Anthony? I think both of them have got the ability to play together. And I think the big thing with Ahmad this season, he's built up a really good relationship with Patrick Roberts, who played either 10 or on the right-hand side. I think that's the beauty of maybe Ahmad playing in that 10 role, is it'll be super fluid. And United are going to have a lot of games next season, so his development should be good. But it allows United to be, harder to play against. And, operate again. We've got a game here with Roberts on the right-hand side and Mad as the 10. And we look at the average positions for Sunderland. We can see they're both kind of operating in that right channel. So give United good balance, I think, Imad as a number 10 in there. Allowing him to operate centrally, but also wide. Same with Roberts, allowing him to operate kind of wide, but also centrally. It just gives good fluidity. So I quite like the idea of Ahmad as 10 and Anthony wide right. Again, United are building the wingers of the future at the moment, which is good. Rashi's ill now. Let's have a quick look, see what the latest on Marcus Rashford is. Because it is, I think he should be fine. He's been training this week, hasn't he? There just been reported in The Athletic that Rashford is ill and is a doubt for the trip to Bournemouth. What have we got here? Erik Ten Hag saying he's a doubt through illness. Rashi trained well the whole week, but today he reported as ill. We'll have to see if he recovers during the day, and we'll see tomorrow. So it could just be a little cold, be back. But if not, Anthony Martial through the middle. Maybe start Alejandro Garnacho. A little bit of intensity on the left. Yeah, I think we'll go with that. If no, Rashford, Martial, Garnacho. If Rashford, Sancho. And then Rashford through the middle. Sounds good to me. But yeah, Man United, big game in the Premier League. It's going to be big for the race for the Champions League, with Liverpool playing at exactly the same time. So need some big performances for United. And hope that we get the Bournemouth of the last two games, not the really weird, inconsistent Bournemouth where they just turn up every other game. So let's hope we get the same Bournemouth that faced Chelsea. Hopefully they're chilling. They're on the beach with the flip-flops, as the cliche goes. Right, let's finish things off talking Premier League. Manchester City could win the title versus Chelsea. They were absolutely brilliant against Real Madrid. One of the most complete performances in a Champions League semi-final. Madrid were just so awful in this game. But I think you've got to give City the credit. The way that City pressed Real Madrid in the first half of the game was absolutely sublime. Real Madrid had no answer of them playing out from the back, which led to City dominate the ball, the rotation in City's attacking line. And I tell you what, watching someone like İlkay Gundogan live, it's absolutely fascinating. This guy, right, is probably a passing option in every single pass, every single move into feet. He'll receive it one in 5 times, but his movement off the ball is so good. His movement, his communication, is like his body, his shape is absolutely fantastic. If you are a young player and you want to learn more about being a central midfielder, watch İlkay Gundogan for 90 minutes. Because the way that he's always ready to receive is sublime. The way that he controls the tempo, gets on the ball. Look at that pass accuracy, 93% in a Champions League semi-final, playing in between the lines throughout 3 dribbles completed. in the match, 100% of his tackles, 2 chances created, an absolute phenom. And he's a player that doesn't get the same coverage, you'd say, as a Kevin De Bruyne, as a Jack Grealish in there. But I tell you what, massive part of City's end of season form. Superb. Saying that, Bernardo Silva, again, put in a big performance. It's weird. I've watched Bernardo Silva live a handful of times. And in those handful of times, he has been the best player on the pitch, which is interesting. I saw him in the Nations League a few years ago for Portugal, player of the tournament. And I thought he was superb against Real Madrid. His intensity in press, but also his creativity in possession, with his dribbling, with his passing, and of course 2 massive goals for Manchester City to get it started. I think he's going to be big in their finals in the back end of the season, but I don't expect him to start. I think City will kind of revert a little bit more to the team that they played against Everton. I'd expect Phil Foden, Mahrez and Alvarez to all start. I think Gundogan will play, but I think we'll see some rest for some of the players. I think John Stones will probably get a rest with Laporte coming in this game, but I think it'll be more City kind of versus Everton than City versus Real Madrid. Kevin De Bruyne will want to play, though, because he's on 26 assists in all competitions. He's only provided assists more once in his career. That was for Wolfsburg in the 2014-15 season. In my opinion, the best Kevin De Bruyne. A little bit of a controversial opinion, but the Kevin De Bruyne I enjoyed the most. He needs 4 more assists to match Lionel Messi's record for 30 assists in a single season. In his last 9 games, he's got 11 goals plus assists. He could very much be there in the team, forcing Guardiola to play. Again, it is a huge game, but Chelsea have been very off in recent weeks. Their performances, the collective identity of the side has been pretty poor under Frank Lampard. So he fully expects City at the Etihad to clean them up in there. In terms of the threats, obviously Sterling grabbed the brace against Forest, but when you get cut open by Nottingham Forest and you're facing City the next week, it is a serious worry. Iwobi was absolutely superb, and he's a player that I really like at Union. I've liked at Union Berlin. I think he's adapted really well to the Premier League. Clean, clinical finisher. When you're facing someone like Erling Haaland, that will want to continue to break records, 36 goals in 33 games. He wants his 40. And I think Guardiola will play him. 1.1 goals per game is, quite frankly, bonkers in there. I do think there's kind of, another level to him as well. I don't think this player's anywhere near where he's going to be, which is crazy. There's another beast in there I think that Guardiola will unlock within the next 2 years, which is scary for the Premier League. But I expect it to be very rotated for City. Mahrez starting, Foden starting, Alvarez and Gundogan would I expect for the midfield line. And we'd be surprised to see John Stones. He's in my fantasy team, so I'd like to see him, but I don't think he'll be there. I think this is going to be far too much for Chelsea to handle. And City will go on to win the Premier League title, which will be the 3rd time in a row, becoming the 2nd team ever to do that after Manchester United, who've done it twice. So United have really got to stop that treble. But yeah, good chat there. Score predictions, please, for this game. I think it's going to be a hammering, maybe a 3-2. Nah, that's rubbish. I'd say 4-5-0 City in this game. And Erling Haaland is going to be given the triple captain for this week in fantasy football. It is active. I think he's going to do it. It's going to be scary times. If Portugal doesn't win anything with their golden generation, it's going to be sad. I think they're just going to continue to be golden, to be honest. I think Portugal's talent academies in Benfica, in Porto, in Sporting are churning out quality at the moment. If you look at the UEFA Youth League, they're constantly up there with those teams. So Portugal will continue to win, I think. And I'd say the Ronaldo Portugal's, not going to be as good as what the Portugal's going to come, I believe. I think they're going to be more complete as a side. Better defenders, better goalkeeper, better fullbacks, better midfielders, you'd say, with, the likes of Bernardo Silva getting to that kind of prime in there. Sport Gang 4-0 to City. Moz is saying Chelsea to win 1-0. City will protect themselves and rest. Interesting stuff. It's crazy how Haaland reached that goal tally and he's been sub late. When City have got the game in the bag, yeah, it's absolutely bonkers. But triple captain Haaland for this week to save my FPL season. But guys, any more thoughts for today? Do get into the chat. It's been a good stream. The brain hopefully has been working for you people. It's kind of it's been a tough week. Challenging mentally, been very fatigued, but we did it, guys. We got the job done. So big GGs in the chat. Make sure you subscribe if you are new. We'll be back on Monday with the Premier League review. I did say that last week, but I was ill last week, so hopefully we'll be feeling absolutely sprightly next Monday. Bob's going to go 4-0 City. Darren's going to go 2-0 City. Yeah, I think 4-0 City. Game, set, match. But yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. We'll be back Monday. See you very, very soon on the Statman Dave Clips channel. GG's in the chat. Have a great weekend. And make sure you, go for a walk. Drink some water. Go and see your family.